That's Yes from their brand new live album, Topographic Drama, Live Across America. And that is a track that was originally on the album Drama. And it's called Man in a White Car. And I'm talking to the man who actually sang that particular live version, Jon Davison, the lead singer with Yes. Jon, how are you doing?
I'm splendid, John. How are you?
I'm very well. The new live album, it's great. You've done a few live albums with the band, and you've done a studio album, of course, Heaven and Earth, which I'm sure we'll get to talk about in a minute. But the new live album really, for me, just captures the essence of what Yes have been doing over the last 18 months, couple of years. You've been going out doing featured albums, and the albums that you've done on this live album are Drama, and of course excerpts from Tales from Topographic Oceans. And there's some other tracks in there as well, but these two albums have proved to be incredibly popular with the fan base. How is it for you singing them? Because of course, I mean, we had Trevor Horn on Drama and we had Jon Anderson on Tales from Topographic Oceans. How is it for you coming in? How do you view those two particular albums?
Well, they're really so very different from one another. And if you look at kind of the grand scheme of the 70s era of Yes, and then Drama ushering in, it was a transitional album, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're just so, if you look at that bulk of that period, they're just really completely opposite albums.
It's funny, really, because they are two very different albums, and in many ways different styles on initial listen, and yet when you listen to them in depth, they're both very much Yes albums, aren't they?
That is true. That's the magic of Yes music. It's so diverse, and yet it all feels so familiar in that respect.
How did you feel about singing Run Through the Light? Because you were actually the first Yes vocalist to sing that live, so there's a first for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, singing the Drama material, it kind of gave me a bit more, and Run Through the Light's a perfect example of that. It gave me a little bit more rite of passage to experiment and interpret because of the lack of live exposure of the material. And I had just been so accustomed to singing in the Jon Anderson style that it was a challenge to sing more aggressively and put on sort of a different face for that, a whole different attitude entirely. So I really enjoyed that challenge, learning to sing a little bit more aggressively and putting more of a kind of a rock edge on things.
Well, Run Through the Light, it was never performed. Jeff Downs said, well, we never did that live because it was a little bit too orchestrated at the time. We thought, maybe, I don't know whether we could do that justice live. But of course now, the band do it as part of the album. And it must have been a great thrill for you to be the first person actually singing that live. And of course, as you said, that because that song had never been performed live. Some of the other songs had been, but that hadn't. That must have given you a little more leeway for interpretation, perhaps.
Exactly. That's right. And that's, you can't really ask for anything more as a performer, to be handed something that, yes, you hold in high esteem and respect, and yet it's sort of like, have at it, go for it, it's yours.
Always a great attitude to have. And the thing is, when you're a singer and you're fronting a band like Yes, I mean, you kind of stand and fall by the sort of performance that you give on the night, and it can be different on any given night, can't it?
Yes, it can. It can. Definitely when you have a challenge before you, the higher vocals, and that's really high stuff. Of course, there's a whole different Anderson approach with singing in a higher fashion, but with the Drama stuff, trying to sing a little bit more aggressively with a different emotional edge to it. You don't always know what's going to come out of your mouth because you're touring, you're tired, you have all the elements working against you, and those songs are very challenging. Again, Run Through the Light, very high vocal, and with that aggressive edge to it. I think I did quite well with it, but it certainly nonetheless was a challenge, a new challenge every night.
Next year, of course, is the 50th anniversary of Yes, and you must be absolutely over the moon to be able to front the band during this very special year. It all starts with Cruise to the Edge, And, of course, we have the special guest of Tony Kaye as well, who's a founder member of Yes.
I know, John, I'm really excited. I mean, I've been given such a bounty of blessings just, with what I've achieved in Yes already, but then to have all these extra things, Trevor Horn last year and Tony Kaye coming up, and it's all been such an honor and will continue to be. I'm really excited to work with Tony, and he's such a charming individual, and I'm just really excited to share the stage with him and watch him and learn from him and just sort of bask in his aura.
The great thing is, next year, as we said, is the 50th anniversary of Yes. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame last year. And of course, there's that very famous photograph of you and Jon Anderson. And it struck me as you two guys really found a great level ground to meet on there. And you seem to get on really well. Is that the case?
Yes, it was wonderful. That was my first time meeting Jon. Very first time. And that picture encapsulates that moment. And you could see it in our faces. So it was a very exciting, another blessing. And regardless of what's going on between bands, and we don't have to go there, but
yeah, I know.
Just to make a connection with him on a personal level, eye to eye, singer to singer, it was a highlight for me.
Well, that's it. I mean, it's at the end of the day, it's two singers with a common interest, really, isn't it?
Right, and I just hope, at one point there's something him and I could do together, or we could share the stage together.
He's actually voiced an interest. He said, I think I could sing with Jon Davison, which is great to come from him.
Yeah.
But it's like, the great thing is, at the end of the day, I think all the members who've been in Yes actually serve the music, and that's the most important thing.
Right. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. It's just such an extensive family tree, and everyone's put their input, Benoit as well, and it's just different chapters, and, it's all part of the grand tale.
Well, that's it. And the great thing is that the tale is still unfolding. Now, while we're on tales, which leads us very nicely into Tales from Topographic Oceans. Now, in the past, I can remember, I think it was on either the first or the second cruise to the Edge, you and Steve performed Leaves of Green, which is great, and it's a very nice sort of way of easing you into Topographic Oceans. But really, that is such an immense album. How did you feel about tackling both the Revealing Science of God and, of course, Ritual? It's an incredibly iconic piece of work, isn't it?
Oh, it absolutely is, yes. And I have such fond early memories of first discovering that album and how esoteric it all seemed, and how I had to spend so much time with it just to come to understand it, and how I benefited from that experience, from absorbing it all. So actually having, on a practical level, to get to learning the part and putting it all together, I felt I had a huge advantage, having been a listener of that music for a long time. So that really was a hand up in terms of tackling it all. And I had done Close to the Edge and Awaken and longer pieces, but those songs in particular are just so fleshed out and huge challenges.
Was there any time when you were first starting, maybe rehearsing these songs, where you think, well, okay, I know these songs and we'll go through them? Was there any point in any of those songs where you hit somewhere and you went, oh, hang on, I maybe need to reevaluate my thoughts on this?
Absolutely, of course. That's par for the course, I think. But that, not just on a personal level, but as a band as well. Because it's interesting and I'm sorry if I'm getting off track, but I just wanted to insert this. It's interesting to watch how Alan was translating to Jay, how he count those passages within that music, and yet how Steve on the other side of the stage is, well, I count it this way, and they all have this different way of, enabling themselves to have some kind of rhythmic foundation or melodic foundation, but how diverse, just as the personalities are so diverse in the band, they all have such different roles, and somehow it all congeals, it all comes together. But to be in the middle as the vocalist standing there, because, John, there's those long musical passages with the music.
Absolutely.
And just to, witness Steve and Alan, Alan was on that album. That was his first studio album.
Yes.
So he has a big stamp on that album, and it was so exciting just to be there and to watch them put it all together. And, of course, Billy has done a fantastic job. And, it's been such a great experience, and I'm glad that we get to continue on with Tales in the UK now coming up next year.
Well, the great thing, I mean, I'm very lucky. I'm very lucky because I've been able to see, I'm a privilege to be able to be allowed in to watch Yes rehearse and see you do stuff. And I've said this to Steve Howe, and I said, you will take something like 4 bars at the end of a song and go, actually, what if we try it this way? And the passion that you guys actually inject into what you do, even in a rehearsal, just to get maybe 4 bars of a song right. I've never seen that with a band before, ever. I mean, I've seen bands rehearse, but not to the, if you like, extent that, yes, take things so seriously.
Right, and I think that it keeps the interpretation new and exciting. If you look back at all the live versions of different songs, the songs are always a little bit different. Or looking back at a DVD, for example, there's always a little bit of a different feel on the songs, and it's because of that, for that very reason that you pointed out. And so it keeps the music adventurous in sort of a jazz-like mentality, sort of.
Yeah.
Not that they're improvising, but they're stretching, and there's a push and pull to the music. It's always, the muscle is always being flexed. It's never done the same way.
Long may it continue. And the album is with us now. We're going to go out with a bit of a yes standard, Heart of the Sunrise, but we've got the album with us now. We've got the Cruise to the Edge coming up, sailing out of Tampa in February, and then, of course, the UK tour, and then stretching ahead of you, you've got the American tour again. I imagine that you are just waiting to get out there and do stuff next year.
I absolutely am, John, and I'm so excited to connect with bands and share the mutual enthusiasm and love for the great story that is Yes.
You're listening to Classic Rock Radio.